Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Daily MBA. In today's episode, I'm going to wrap up all of my service design episodes, but I'm not going to be talking about any other part or process that is needed in service design. Instead, I'm going to be talking about the most important skill in service design and probably the most underestimated and important tool in business. And this is going to be storytelling. But more specifically, I'm going to talk about how storytelling can supercharge whatever it is that you're working on. Because it can be either building a new service like we were talking with service design, but also just improving an existing one, pitching something to investors, communicating the problems to your managers. Everything is going to be barely enough when you only have the data. You need to tell the right story. And in this episode, I'm going to unpack why storytelling is so important and why we need it in order to improve our overall business capabilities. So first, I wanted to start a little bit with the science behind storytelling, because it's important to understand why you need to learn about this business skill. And definitely there's many people that keep saying that there are many top business skills like maybe finance or negotiation. For me, the top skill that you need in business overall would be storytelling. And it's not only me, it's backed by research. So some researchers at Princeton actually discovered something fascinating. And is that when someone tells you a story, the listener's brain actually starts to mirror the storyteller's brain. And this is called neural coupling. That means that the stories quite literally are going to sync in our minds when you have someone telling it and someone listening to it. Now, when you only show numbers or charts, for example, last time I was explaining the importance of having numbers, showing cost reduction, increase in revenue. This is going to be very useful, but only the parts of the brain that are associated with language and logic will light up. But when you tell a story, the entire brain is going to light up, literally. This has been proved in stories, and when you have like sensory, emotional, motor, decision-making areas also lighting up, because we humans love stories. We have evolved from stories, and we always want to listen to stories. We are not born to look at Excel charts or just financial things, because those are kind of boring. They are very relevant, but we will only pay attention to them if they are told through us. And one additional fact to convince you that storytelling is the most important thing you'll need in business is that a researcher from Stanford called Jennifer Acker found that stories are 22 times more memorable than facts alone. So if you get there to your company and you're making a presentation only about facts, most likely it's going to be forgotten unless you have a story. So, okay, I think we can all agree now that storytelling is very important, but what I had for today is 4 frameworks that you can use for storytelling, so we can do storytelling in the proper way. And these models, of course, they're going to be frameworks that someone made up. You can either use them, mix them, take whichever's working best for you, because you have to try them out and see which one feels more natural to you. But I'm going to be covering all of them in a little bit of detail. The first one is going to be called the SCQA Model, which is the abbreviation for situation, complication, question, and answer. So this framework comes from Barbara Minto, who designed it for McKinsey, and it's going to be perfect for structuring a narrative in a strategic and logical way. Because here's how it works. You start with a situation. So you tell what is the current state, then you say the complication, so what is the tension or challenge that's happening over here. Then you ask a question, which is what key question needs to be answered. And lastly, you will have an answer. So what's the proposed solution or insight? And this framework is very useful for service design because you're literally guiding whoever's listening to your story into how you got into that specific solution. And so SCQA is going to help you shape the story in a way that helps the listener step by step through logic and urgency, get into your solution. So this one is very useful. The second framework that you have is going to be called ABT, and it's abbreviation for and, but, therefore. So this one is going to be very short, but it's also very powerful, and it comes from Randy Olson. And basically, it only has 3 words. First one, and, you want to say what's true. So this and this. But you're going to say what's the problem. So similar to the previous one, but you'll say something, something, and something, something, but problem. Therefore, solution. The good thing that I like about this one is that you can put it in a single slide and it will be more impactful because it's just a couple words, it looks very clean, and it will help you showcase your idea in a very simplified way, which is something that's very hard to do. When you manage to say the things that you want to say with lesser words, that will mean that you're truly understanding them. And that's why I do all of this podcast, in order to memorize all of the concepts that I learned. But so this model, the ABT one, is going to be one that you for sure should use in any type of presentation that you're doing, not only service design. There's a third model that's called the Pixar Story Spine. And this one, you might recognize it because it's almost how every Pixar movie is structured, but it's just as useful for service designers or for someone that's working in any business because it helps you imagine the user journey. So it's also especially useful for product managers. And the structure goes like this. Once upon a time, you'll tell the current state or something that's happening. Every day, blah, blah, blah. Until one day, and you're going to over here make like a pause, something's going to change. And then because of that, blah, 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 until finally. So it's 5 parts. Once upon a time, every day, until one day, because of that, and finally. And so let's imagine this. I'm going to put an example because this one sounds a bit more ambiguous, into like a banking app example. So if I say once upon a time, Maria used the bank's app to check the balance every day. So she logged in, she paid the bills, and she would leave. Until one day, she noticed a suspicious charge and she couldn't get help. Because of that, she had to go to a branch and she spent hours waiting. And she started exploring other banks. Until finally, we introduced 24/7 in-app chat for emergency support. So see what I did that? It's the same from the previous ones that we were using. You're kind of telling a normal situation. You're saying something that's happening every day. Until one day would be the part where you say the problem. And then because of that, how the user feels from this problem, usually frustration. This can lead to churn. This can lead to all of the bad things. Until finally is how you'll fix it. Because here is where your solution comes in as the hero, as in all of the Pixar movies. So this one is going to be very interesting. It's also kind of funny, and it depends on the audience. Of course, you can't introduce this like more humorous things to specific types of audiences, but for most of them, it's going to be a fun way to imagine things and remember them. Now, the fourth methodology that I want to show you is called the hero's journey. And this one is, again, very popular. Maybe you've heard of it. But this framework, originally from scholar Joseph Campbell, can be applied to any type of user journey, specifically in like onboarding or similar stuff like that. But a simplified version would be that there is an ordinary world, and this is what life looks like before your service. Then there's a call to adventure. So some problem arises, and the journey is that the user is going to try to solve it. But in this journey, the user will encounter a major pain point, which is called a crisis. And then transformation is going to bring service, clarity, ease, and resolution. So lastly, there's a return, the user is changed and empowered. So this one has a little bit more parts. It has 6 parts, so it's probably the longest of all of them because SCQA was 4, ABT was 3 parts, Pixar Story was 5 parts, and now this one's going to be 6, which are going to be the ordinary world, call to adventure, the journey, the Christ, the transformation, and the return. Those are going to be the parts of a hero's journey. And yeah, you can also put a story in it to make it easier to understand. Personally, I haven't used this one, so I don't like it as much. It becomes a little bit more complex, and more specifically, I cannot remember all of the parts. But if you do like it, then you can use it, you can test it out, and you can maybe implement it. And the last framework that I want to show you is one that I heard from Harvard Business School that is probably one of the most impactful and short ones. That is what, so what, and now what. So those are the 3 whats that you want after every speech. So the what is something that you're trying to say. Of course, in every conversation, presentation, or thing that you're doing, you should be able to explain your what. So what is the important part, and many people forget about this one. When you're presenting something, we have this issue on the app. You always have to tell the so what. What does this imply? So if I continue with my app problem, I can say, and this is causing a lot of costs because we are getting a lot of bug improvements over there. I don't know. And then after the what and the so what, you should always say now what. You should say the solution. You should never stay in the problem, but you should say the solution. So now what? Now we are planning on fixing this problem by doing XYZ. So this framework is very short, is the last one that I had for improving storytelling, and I think it's one of my favorite ones because it's one that you can mix with some of the others. In all of your presentations, you should always think of the what, the so what, and the now what. But, okay, now that you know all of this, you might think of when might I apply all of this knowledge? And long story short, everywhere, whenever you're making a presentation or a pitch into people that care about the project that you're doing. But if you want to be more specific into service design, it could be first in the research phase when you're collecting stories. Second, in the ideation and co-creation part, because instead of just asking what should the service do, you might think of like, what story will the user say after using it? So this is going to also help you switch into a different narrative. Third, you can also use it in the prototyping part and prototyping, for example, emotional states. And lastly, for stakeholder alignment. So remember that you're not just presenting a service, you're telling the story of someone's life with and without your solution. I want to wrap up my episode by telling you 5 tips so you can improve your storytelling capabilities, not only in service design, but in business overall. And the first one is always translate insights into human terms. What does this mean? You shouldn't say 25% of users were frustrated, but you can say 1 out of 4 gave up halfway to just call their wives and tell them to do it for them. Something like that. And I think there are a lot of memes on how the US does this with everything they see because they don't use normal metric system. They keep using other things that are more relatable. So translate always your insights into more human terms, and that can be including a story. Second tip for improving storytelling is using tension. What happens if we don't solve this? Good stories always will have stakes, so make sure to add tension into your story. Third one, sketch it out. Even if you're not an artist, now with AI you don't even need to be one, but I think visually when you can show the story that you're telling, this will have a lot of impacts, just because we enjoy watching things and we will consume a lot more the story if we're also watching something that is going to be joining it. Fourth tip is going to be co-create stories with the users. And for this, you can ask them to describe their ideal service, but also have them narrate, for example, a perfect day using your product. Whenever a user tells you a story, you can also use that story. They're already creating the story for you. So you don't always have to come up with a story. You can co-create it with someone else. And fifth, build a story library. Collect real user quotes, collect screenshots, collect drawings, collect audio clips, and create this like data set of real voices so you can tell your story with other people. So basically, there's 5 tips that I received in class were always translate insights into human terms, use tension, use visuals, co-create stories, and build a story library. If you have these things, I'm sure that in your next pitch or presentation to management, whenever you're proposing a project, it will have a lot more traction and your stakeholders will be a lot more entertained. Because remember, storytelling is going to be something cognitive and emotional, and it will help people understand and act better than if you're just giving them facts. So with this, I wrap up all of my service design episodes. Let me know in the comments if this was useful. If you want me to do another series of episodes just focusing on storytelling and how we can improve it, because I've also taken extra courses on storytelling. But let me know and keep sharing my podcast, keep learning with others so I can spread my MBA knowledge with the rest of the world. Stay tuned and see you next week.